For those of you who don't know me, my name's Michelle Murtha. I have been working in IT for over 20 years. I have worked on the ServiceNow platform specifically for about 6, and got introduced to Nuvolo prior to starting with GlideFast. I've done a couple of implementations and had some experience on the platform hands-on. So I volunteered to just share some of what I know and hopefully dispel maybe any rumors that might be out there. We're gonna really just talk about what is Nuvolo. It's a term you guys have heard and you might know a little bit about the platform, but I want to showcase a little bit about how does it work. You know, it's this third-party tool on ServiceNow, but what does that really look like? So we're actually going to get in and look at an environment. We're going to talk about what functionality it covers, like what does it have out of the box. I want to talk just a little bit about, you know, what are the clients that could really benefit from this? I know this isn't necessarily a sales pitch. However, we're all consultants, and when we're out there talking with clients, we may find a client that we're like, you know, you might want to consider this, and then hook them up, you know, with our sales folks. So it's good to kind of know where the Nuvolo platform might fit with our clients. And after some demo, we're also going to talk at the end just about Nuvolo. As I mentioned, it's a third-party software. You can go to their website, see it. Probably there's a little recorded demo. Their primary focus has been enterprise asset management for clinical facilities, and then they added lab and manufacturing. They also have a space and move management component. They have some newer product offering for medical device cybersecurity. I don't know a whole lot about it, to be honest, so we're not going to talk about that today. You can get it via the App Store. However, note that it requires Nuvolo licensing to download. Like, you can't get the download until you have a license key. And so we can't load it into our personal dev instances. So that does limit what we can do with it from a development and play with it perspective. So what I'm going to focus on today is really enterprise asset management for facilities and clinical. Part of that's because that's the elements that I've been the most involved with. But the other thing is there is a lot to this platform, and we're just not going to have time in a share the wealth session to do all of it. But maybe we can always come back and do share the wealth on space and move management specifically. Asset management, when they say asset management, this is what they're talking about. So a lot of it are things that we're familiar with from a hardware or software asset management perspective. So obviously everything related to the procuring of assets, having, you know, model types and having models, having asset types, manufacturers and vendors. And then they go into a little bit more, and I'm going to showcase a little bit of this around how you can set up maintenance schedules for work orders to automatically generate on those assets. You can also have detailed procedures and checklists. So imagine, you know, a facilities technician being sent out to do an annual cleaning on some furnace, an HVAC component. And one of the things that they have to do before they can even start their annual maintenance is they have to do a lockout, tag out procedure. And so that's what those checklists, you kind of have a pre-checklist as well as a working checklist, and that can help remind them of specific steps they need to take. Contracts. So they have contracts. It's similar to the ServiceNow contract module. The one thing about contracts, though, in ServiceNow is it's part of the IT business management module, the ITBM. And so it's not available to everyone who might be doing asset management. If they want contract management, they have to pay extra. In Nuvolo, they include all of that together. So contract management is a part of the overall asset management. Then we get into the parts and materials inventory with stock rooms and some automatic reordering, very similar to how ServiceNow does inventory. They have corrective work orders. So this would be kind of the equivalent of either an incident or a request potentially. They do have other types of work orders that we'll look at. They do have a module around safety and recall alerts. So as soon as they get alerted, they can put that in there, and then they can track which assets fall into that. And then they have a location hierarchy, which is different than the ServiceNow location hierarchy. And I'll definitely show you that while we're in this tool as well. So the big reasons why they want to go after asset management, Nuvolo, like what's their main reason? The reason these clients want to do this is either for compliance or total cost of ownership. So for the compliance side, especially in the healthcare clinical industry, you're dealing with life-saving equipment. And if that equipment isn't being kept up, isn't under warranty, isn't being maintained regularly, isn't being repaired when it needs to be, obviously they're opening themselves to a huge lawsuit. And there are compliance organizations, depending on which hospital system or health system you're working with, they may have different compliance requirements. The other piece is the total cost of ownership. And when you have aging equipment, you want to make sure that you're spending the money wisely. So if a piece of equipment has been repaired already 5 times and it's costing more to continue to repair it than it would be to replace it, that's the kind of visibility that the Nuvolo product's hoping to provide to management so that they can make those kinds of intelligent decisions.
Michelle, can I stop you for just a second?
Please do.
And this is Mike, by the way, and Nuvolo's very interesting topic for me with a couple of our government clients. What kind of reporting, dashboarding, does all of this integrate with ServiceNow's, out of the box tools?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm going to show it to you. It's okay. But yes, everything you can do with ServiceNow, you can do on the Nuvolo table data as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's a great question. And that's part of why I wanted to do this, is because I think there's a lot of folks who have this idea of what it might be, but they have a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. And what I really hope is that when you leave here today, you feel like, hey, Nuvolo's, it's a big deal in some ways, and it's not that big of a deal from an implementation perspective. We got this. So yeah, let's make sure that I fully answer your question by the end. And if I don't, come back and hit me up. Okay.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Sure. All right. So how does it work? So you have your ServiceNow instance, and obviously, you have standard user access to ServiceNow, usually through single sign-on or LDAP, or both, like a combo, right? Nuvolo comes in, and it's basically a scoped application within ServiceNow. So when you do that download for a client, you're just adding in their update sets, basically. And it becomes another scoped application within ServiceNow, just like HR, just like security ops, all of those. And then you still have your end user access to ServiceNow via the portal. Nuvolo does come with a portal, but it does come with Service Portal, and you can integrate it with the regular service portals as well. Now, the one thing that is unique about Nuvolo is they integrate to AutoCAD, and the latest version allowed you to do a direct integration where ServiceNow can connect to that AutoCAD server that the client has and do a pull. Basically, it's a one-way pull from the AutoCAD, and it's on demand. It's not automatic, but you can pull that in and create and update your floor maps and your spaces in ServiceNow. The other thing that makes Nuvolo unique from ServiceNow is that it has its own mobile app, and you can go and download this app from the store, but you have to have an instance to connect to. It is not the same as the ServiceNow app. It's not even built on the same technology as the ServiceNow mobile platform. So it does require some special skills to be able to work in it. What it does is, and it's only for the licensed users, so it's only for the back end. It's not for the front end users who are requesting things. It's specifically for the technicians who are working on tickets. It does a data sync between them. It maintains a local database on the mobile device, which allows them to go truly offline. Some of the areas, obviously, that these technicians work in either have no network access or can't have network access because, you know, they're in a cardiology ward or something like that. So they have this offline mode, and as I mentioned, it does the data syncing between them. So some of the things that are common with ServiceNow that you would see and you need to be aware of is that there's certain things that they share. So obviously the users, the roles, and the groups. As it's a scoped app, you have your own security roles and your own groups for that scoped app, but it's all in the same table. So all the groups and the users, they're all together in our standard common tables. Dashboards, homepages, reports. Like I said, anything you can do with ServiceNow, you can do with the Nuvolo data. And again, all of those, when somebody creates a home page, you'll see it under ServiceNow pages, you know, UI pages. Just like you would if they'd created their own version of a change management dashboard or something. Portals, I mentioned before, email notifications. So it comes with a few email notifications in their update set, but ultimately everything you can do with email notifications from ServiceNow also apply here. The one thing to keep in mind is that whatever that name is that it's sending email from, or whatever they're replying to, that's going to be the same unless you do some sort of a spoof. CMDB base table and models. So they extend all of their asset records from the CMDB base table, not the asset table, the CMDB table, the CI table. And then they also have all their models, which are in the models, the base model table. They do extend and have their own model table. Asset types and parts are all in the common tables. They use the common departments table, the cost centers table, the purchase and transfer orders are all part of that same table. The task-based tables, so all of the work orders that you would do in Nuvolo are an extended table off of task directly, which is good because if anybody ever brings up their list and says, show me all my tasks, it would show them. And then they do use knowledge, and that is a common knowledge base. And you can do the same thing you would with knowledge, where you have knowledge that's internal, say, to just the facilities team, and then you have knowledge that's external for all the end users. So that's a lot that they have in common. So let's talk about what's unique. So they have their own company table. They had a very specific way that they wanted to classify companies, and they didn't want to interfere with anything that IT maybe was doing for their vendors. Locations and space hierarchy, as I mentioned, this is unique to Nuvolo. It is not the same as the locations that come in from ServiceNow or like for IT. And I'll talk about that in a second. As I mentioned, they have their own CI class extended off of the CMDB base table. Models and parts are both extended off of the core tables. Work orders and work projects are extended from task, and I'll show you those when we get in the system. They do maintain their own stockrooms records as well as contracts. As I mentioned before, it does not overlap with ServiceNow contracts because that's in a different license class that ServiceNow wouldn't allow them to use. Risk model and calculations. So they have a whole risk model and 3 or 4, I can't remember, calculations off the that are come out of the box, but they can also put in their own risk model and determine calculation, basically show me all of my assets with the highest risk. Imagine it that way. Maintenance schedules, recurrence frequencies. Again, I'm going to show you this. They have something called knowledge block, which is extended from knowledge. I haven't looked at it that much. I just know that it's a unique table. And then finally, checklists as well. So it's kind of a combination of common things as well as scoped app pieces. All right, so folks who can benefit from Nuvolo, I've already mentioned healthcare. So any group that's having to manage clinical assets can really benefit from this. There are a number of other tools out there. So this tends to be, you find healthcare organizations who already have ServiceNow and they're looking for an easier or cheaper way. Plus that line between clinical asset management and IT is getting blurrier. It used to be that you'd have all these clinical assets out there, but maybe they weren't even network aware. And now we're getting more network aware, and now we're getting ones that you have a piece of clinical equipment, imagine like an MRI machine, that has to have a PC attached to it and all the storage for all of the imaging. And so now it's a combination of IT and clinical that has to work on that equipment. Any organization where IT and facilities need to work together. So you think about all the times that we're doing onboarding, offboarding, transfers, moves, all of those things. And our IT clients say, oh, well, and then I need a ticket to go over to facilities. And, you know, in the old days, this mostly was an email. Some of the groups have pulled facilities in and given them licenses to be able to work on tickets. But facilities is kind of treated as a non-IT user. And then it's like, yeah, but what kind of licenses are we paying for? And then facility says, well, I want to be able to track my stuff in there too. And so, you know, we end up clubbing something together that works. But Nuvolo basically says, look, if we've already built it for you, you just have to put your stuff in and you can work together. Any organization asking about using ServiceNow to manage facilities, so kind of just talk to that. Any organization wants to use floor mapping capabilities. So there are clients out there who are looking at purchasing Nuvolo simply so they can track where all of their IT equipment is and be able to track where the people are sitting. So it doesn't necessarily have to be clinical or facilities. And then I don't know if any of you ever got to work on the ServiceNow facilities management platform. Here we go. So on the left nav, you'll notice that it looks pretty much the same in here. You'll just see that we have, you know, clinical asset management. We'll have facilities, asset management, and then lab and manufacturing are down here. Here's move management. So Nuvolo properties, UI config. So you can see they even have a real estate management, it looks like now. So now one of the things they have tried to do is make it so that you don't have to have a full sysadmin to administer the Nuvolo pieces. This reminds me a little bit of HR, where they've tried to expose some of the capabilities that an admin would do into actual tables and forms so that someone else can do those activities without having that admin level access. So I went ahead and I started them just to make it easier for the demo. And we're going to start by looking at a floor map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in actually floors. We're going to pull up a floor. And so you can see we've got a couple of maps loaded into this environment. We're specifically going to pick this one. And if I say view floor plan. So on here, this doesn't look very interesting. The first thing we notice is that we've got layers here. And for anybody who's worked with an AutoCAD drawing in the past, you know that there are multiple layers. So there's like, this is the floor layer that's kind of got all the cool drawings on it. You can have other layers where you can call out, say, specific users on that. So if all I did was pick users, go away. You can see we only have one user assigned to this floor right now. I'm not entirely sure what the locations are doing right now from a a layer perspective. But so they have this building. You can kind of see, it looks like it's a retail space, obviously. And it's got some different spaces. So one of the cool functions that it provides is it allows you to do kind of a color by. So I can start by saying, well, I want to color this by department, and just trying to get this out of the way. Move that way over there. And let me turn my layer back on. And I don't know that it's showing well enough on the screen share, but like they've got a couple of areas that are kind of colored here. They look kind of off-white. That one's not all that interesting, but they do give you a key. And so these are real estate areas, apparently. Let's go do a different one here. Let's do it by location type. So this is kind of a cool thing where you can basically take a floor and the space is on a floor and say, well, what kind of type of space is it? And so we can see here, we've got kind of the main area is that yellow. And I don't even see. Maybe that's unlabeled, I don't know. And then you can see we've got an office, and when you hover on it, I don't know, I'm hoping you guys can see the little pop-up. It shows, you know, the location number and then the type. So that's a private office. This is a toilet space. This is food service. Back here they have like a general storage room. And so again, at a glance, people very quickly see, okay, where do I have things going on? And then finally, occupancy status, which this only has the one space. And it's fully occupied, but you can specify for any given space how many occupants can you have. And actually it says it's over occupied, which means they never entered an occupancy for this. But you can say, okay, this bullpen, for example, can have up to 4 people and there's only 2. So it's going to be under occupied versus just regular occupied or vacant. So as a facilities planner, if you're trying to figure out where you can put the new person, you would be able to see that visually as well. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at a different map that'll showcase some other stuff. So we're going to go into this browse hierarchy, and I wanted to show you the hierarchy because you'll say, well, yeah, ServiceNow does that. Yes and no. ServiceNow doesn't take it to the level that Nuvolo does. So you can have a region, and these are separate tables. So you have a region. Regions have campuses. So we can say, okay, the region Greater Southwest, we're loading up Texas campuses. Here they are. And then from there, you can go to a site, right? So campus, Texas, site is this. And then you can have multiple floors, and then you can have locations or spaces underneath that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the floor level and bring up the floor map. And once again, turn on the layers. I think this is a default that just needs to be set. So this is a light industrial site. You can see they've got, you know, some pipe racks and well testing and whatever here. If I had to guess, I'd say that looks like a crane to me. But the idea here is again, you can do that color by, and if I do a color by location type, this gets real cool looking here. And so we can see these are mechanical, this is light industrial, there's quarters and residence, it says the driller's house in there. So it can be, a floor map can be very large, it can go outside of the building. On the previous map, you saw that they had like the planter boxes in there. So this is all well and good, but so what? How does this work then with tickets, right? So let's go ahead and let's use that map. If we go back over here, we're going to go to self-service. So it does come with a service catalog. It's a very basic service catalog, but it does have one. So I could come in here and I could say, oh, I have a climate control issue, and I can pick by location. I can actually specify a specific asset that is broken. For example, think about nurses on the floors who have an issue with a piece of equipment. They can call that in and or write that in and specify, you know, the asset tag right on it. And if they go into the locations, they can come in here and they could pick a location, which is fine, right? That's what we typically have to deal with. But they also have this really cool function called Report Facilities Work Order. And you can come in here and it's going to bring up a map. Oh, I got to put in one. So they have to make sure, and most of the time this would default to whatever their, no, I want California. Where was California? Pacific Rim. Cali. Give me a second here. Gotta make sure I pick the right floor. All right, so it's gonna pull up a map. And so not only does this show the map, and I can actually report a specific spot on the map, but I can also see other tickets that are already up here. So if I click on this, I can see, oh, somebody's requested interior finishes in that space. Or up here, I can see someone's reported a cracked planter box. So what's nice about that is you don't get, hopefully, 12 people reporting the same issue for the same thing. It still can happen, but at least it gives it that visibility right away. So we're going to come in here and we're going to drop something here, and so it pulls up my work location for me. I don't have to do anything. We can say repair, and we'll say cracked floor tile, and I could put in any extra details here. And then I can also do an attachment. So I could attach a picture or something if I wanted to. And I submit that. And now you can see I have a tag here that tells me what's going on in that space. So if I was, you know, dispatching technicians out across, this happens to be a fairly small retail space, obviously, but if I was dispatching out to, say, a large factory floor or a hospital floor, I would want to look at this and say, okay, what all needs to be fixed on this floor before I get out there, right? And again, if I have it on my mobile, that's even more helpful because I can see it on my mobile. Let's take a look at what's that work order actually look like on the back end. So I'm going to go into all work orders, and here's that cracked floor tile. So we can see the basics here. You've noticed that they do have business service called out. That could pertain to the type potentially of space it is, or it could just be what's it impacting. So, you know, maybe a retail function or something in this case. The states are set up here. You also can see them across the top. You can have substates, obviously your assignment groups, and then you get into down here in the details. I mean, you've got your comments and everything. Very, very similar to any other screen that you would ever see in ServiceNow. This could easily be an incident or a change request, or, I mean, just based on looking at the screen, it fits in with everything else in ServiceNow. They've got a resolution tab. They've got a couple of interesting things about resolution. And then we get into some of the more specialty fields or sections. So first of all, the schedule. This has a lot more schedule functions, and it's very reminiscent of ServiceNow's functions for projects where you can have a plan start and end, you can have actual start and end, you can do some effort estimated, all kinds of good stuff on this screen. From a financials perspective, if you get the contracts going, and contracts are a whole other conversation, I had to go down that rabbit hole pretty deep at one point in time. The financials really come off of the contracts. And so you can say, well, we had to, this was covered by warranty. We can say these parts were covered because you can add parts in here as well. You can add in some purchase orders for non-contracted labor. Let's say we had a pest control issue. We had to call an exterminator. We don't have a standing contract with them. Anything like that. And then you can also have vendors, and you could pull up a contract. I don't know that, I don't have any in here. But you can pull up a contract, and that would be specific to maybe that piece of equipment or that location. Okay. It has a built-in signature pad, which is kind of cool. So if the process for that business is once you're done with your work, you need somebody to sign it, you can. And then down here, you've got, you can have other work orders associated to it. So you can have a work order with children work orders. You can also use tasks on a work order. They have no workflow, obviously out of the box here, if you just create tasks, but that allows you to definitely put in concise pieces of work that might need to be done in a certain order. You can have SLAs. As you can see, we've put some SLAs in here already. And then we get into the work order itemized costs, and on the screen is where they can enter, well, what kind of cost was associated with this, and then this is how it's doing that total cost of ownership. So whether it was labor and maybe contract labor or purchased, whatever the case is, you can also do parts, and then you can pull from parts inventory. Down here you can see they have some stuff. So a lot of neat capability behind the scenes being pulled together to create this overall solution. You could see contract coverage, and then we're going to go into assets next, and then into the maintenance schedule, so you could see what that would look like. Obviously you can transfer orders and purchase. You could have knowledge. They do have a reservations module. You can even have approvals. So verification data, this is basically where the checklists would show. If they had checklists, it actually shows every single checklist item and who did it. Like, did they say yes, no? We once used this, we had a checklist for a pre and a post vehicle checkout. And so, what's the mileage had to be entered into here, and then when it got back, what was the mileage when it got back? Some of those things. All right, let's go take a look at an actual asset. So here we are looking at all of the devices basically in facilities, and we're just going to go ahead and pick one up. Now, a majority of the information you're going to see on the asset screens require someone to manually enter it, because particularly in the facilities, it's pretty rare that equipment is net aware or could be discovered. The clinical side, it's changing, it's getting different, although a lot of those groups that do have net aware clinical equipment use another tool such as Stanley to keep track of all of their locations. They have like an RFID chip or something on them, or they're net aware so that you could discover them based on an IP address. All right, but here we have, again, very, very similar to what we would see on the asset screens. You do have some additional things here, and Right now, this is just a drop down that's being manually filled in, but you could also use their security module to maybe track some of that or calculate that, the condition. And so obviously the two combo of the security status and the condition along with some other stuff probably is what's used to really calculate the true risk for this particular asset. And then we go down here and you can see like, well, who did we buy it? Well, who was the manufacturer? And then we can also see who did we buy it from. So Ream is the manufacturer, but we actually bought it from AC Wholesalers. And just to make things more complicated, a third vendor, Johnson Controls, is the one that actually services it. So that's partially why they created their own company table, is because they needed to be able to specify what type of vendor is this. You can track relationships right here, as you can see. So you've got like some facilities parts, which is kind of nice. So this particular thing is an air handling unit. And so this is probably a filter, if I had to guess. What's the filter that particular item needs? There's some of the financials that are being auto-calculated based on all of the tickets that have been logged against it, as well as the contract cost. If you had a way to pick up, you know, the downtime or the uptime, you could put all that in here and kind of track it. Potentially loaners, here's where it's calculating a risk. This is the risk formula. We're not going to go obviously through all of these, but you can see there's just a lot of information. If it was aware, which this one looks like it is because it has an IP address, if it is not aware, this is what you could fill it out with, the discovery potentially. As far as I know, Nuvolo does not have any out-of-the-box probes to help with that. So that would be a discovery process that we would need to truly write up. And then down here, you've got your related lists again showing, you know, here's your related parts. Here's the contracts that it has. And then upcoming maintenance. And so let's take a look at how that maintenance thing works. So maintenance is part of the asset management admin function. It's not something that everybody can enter, but you can see how they've set it up so that you could do asset types and part types without having to have full admin system access. Same thing with the models, the software, firmware stuff, if you happen to have, again, equipment that has that. All the external companies right here can be maintained by that asset management admin. Rates, whether you're talking supplier or internal employee. The supplier account, so that's another thing, is they've created a way for you to allow a supplier to log in to get their tickets. Here's all those organization and spaces. So as I mentioned before, regions to campuses to sites to floors to locations. Then you also have your stock rooms. You can have zones. We didn't talk very much about zones. And then this department's table is the same as the main department's table, but they just put it here for ease of access. This is where you can get into like the actual types, the site types, the floor types. We talked about location types, or you can have space use codes, same thing. All of this stuff around work order. So just for example, I'm going to bring this up. You can see from a work order type, you can have out of the box, they have 25 different work order types. Most companies don't use them all. They only have a few that they really want to focus on. But again, same thing with the symptoms and the problem causes, auto assignment rules, resolution codes. They've really tried to make it so that you really shouldn't need full sysadmin access to do most of the maintenance on this. So that's all there. Here's scheduled maintenance. So the first thing you have to do is define, well, what are my frequencies? And so frequency can be everything from annual, we're going to do it every 12 months. We're going to do it maybe every 2 years, so that's the biannual. Hopefully you don't have too many things that are daily. I've seen daily used for mostly like what they call rounds. So I'm going to go walk around and I'm going to visually inspect, certain areas every day. Monthly, quarterly, and then they have some seasonal stuff here, semi-annually, so every 6 months. They also, I've seen this used where we'll set up a schedule where it's, I want it done monthly, except when we're doing the annual, like the annual will also include the monthly work. So we set up one schedule that does 11 months, and then that 12th month is the annual one. So you'll see stuff like monthly except September, for example. Here we go. So when you pull up one of these, this happens to be a vehicle. So they're basically saying, hey, when I have a vehicle that matches this, I want to, we're going to have, in this case, it searches because it's looking for Ford, and the model name specifically is this. They have 1,200 of them in here. And so this also kind of helps them validate, oh yeah, that's what I intended, or no, that's way too many, or that's way too few, whatever the case is. Here's where you can actually even get a threshold, and you can say, well, this only needs to happen if that odometer is greater than 5,000. So that's the other way you can do this, is for a threshold versus a schedule. That's the utilization. So you could see it's on a calendar, it's a utilization, something like that. I'm not going to go over all the details on here, but just to give you an idea. And then once it has this, then you would actually generate the scheduled maintenance, what's called instances. And so these are the instances that have been generated so far. These are for assets, and then you can also do space management, and they don't have any that are space, but you could say, hey, every 3 months we want to wax the floors in all of the common areas or whatever. All right, and that is the end of the demo. Thank you for your time today, and certainly if you have any other questions, reach out. I'd be happy to share whatever I know about the Nuvolo platform.